Okay, is that the Haley Gemara? Okay, what's the Haley? Okay, here we go. So we were at the bottom of the Yud Zayin Amud Beis, and the Gemara was discussing the fact that a ger does not yarshin his father who's a ger, or a goy does not yarshin his father who's a ger. Lo midivrei Torah or lo midivrei sefer. And we know it because the Rashi says his father. Never mind. If you borrowed money from a ger, then it's guy or bon of imay. So really, they're not related at all. Don't give the money back to his children. So a person is Magayr together with his child, and the father lends you money. If the father dies, don't pay back the child. And if you do give back the money, the Chachamim are not happy with you. Rashi says it's neutral. Not that they're not happy with you. It's just that don't think you've impressed anybody. You don't get any brownie points from it. But we're soon going to see that there's actually a Svara Toshis offers that the Chachamim are upset. Why are the Chachamim upset? Because if you give back the money, and the norm is to give back this money, then people are going to falsely think that the relationship between the father and the son. And that's a problem because it might lead to Yibam if one of the brothers should die without a child. So it's for that reason why we'd rather not. We want to actually show that these people are not related. But I'll call upon them, the Gemara asks Sastira about Tanya Ruach HaChamim Nerchei Meni. The case where you're not supposed to give back the money is where the both were born as complete goyim, the father and the son, and only after they were born were they Megayr, and therefore there's less of a connection, and therefore you don't pay back money that was borrowed from the father to the son. But if the child was born after the father became a ger, there we would suggest that you can give back the money. There's enough of a connection there. That's how Rashi is. Tosfos actually learns Pum Fakir. Tosfos learns if it's so there's more of a connection, that's where you shouldn't pay back. Because that's where people could mistakenly think that this is a real relation. And therefore, allow even if there are two brothers involved. Mashenkin, if it's a Rosh Hashanah and a Rosh Hashanah, there you can pay back because there we're not concerned that people will think that these are actually brothers. Said, so yesterday we learned a makar. How do we know that a goy yarshins from his father? The raya was from the parsha of Avodim. The pasuk said that the chishev in konehu, when a goy buys an eved and the family of the eved want to redeem him from the servitude of the goy, the chishev in konehu, they make a cheshbon with the purchaser only to buy this yid back. However, they would not have to make any special chishev with the son of the konehu. Why? Because avodim and eved ivri will not be yarshin. So the Torah takes eved ivri out of the norm of Yerusha, where a goy would yarshin his father. Well, from the fact that the Torah has to make this carve out for avodim, for eved ivri, you have proof positive that everywhere else the assumption is that a goy will yarshin his father. The Torah speaks out of the exception by an eved ivri. That's how we learned on Amud Beis from Chizkiah. We learned in the car that a goy yarshins his father, and Rabbi pointed it out using the svar of Chizkiah. But here, Rabbi Chia bar Abed Amar Yechon suggests a different source in the Torah that Ovid Kechavim Yerushes Ovid, Dichsiv ki Yerusha le'esav nasati es har seir. I gave a Yerusha to Esav har seir. So you see, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave a Yerusha to Esav. Esav is a god. In fact, the Gemara who said, "V'd'yom Yisrael Mamashani." Esav is not a god. Esav is the son of Yitzchak Avinu. He was a Yisrael Momer. So how do you have arrived at a god Yarshus? Elamehacha he livnei loit nasati es or Yerusha. So the fact that loit could be married something to his children, that shows that a goy could yarshin his father. What was wrong with Rabbi's raya? From the fact that the Torah made a carve out for an Eved Ivri that a goy doesn't yarshin an Eved Ivri from his father. There you have proof that everywhere else a goy yarshins his father. Because you made a diak, but those are not the words of the prophet. Therefore, it's not good enough of a raya. But this is more clear. He lived very late, Nasatius er Yerusha. For over my time, he never happened. Maybe, really, that's not a good raya. Maybe normally a girl will not yarshin. But here, out of the respect for Avram Avinu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the Yerusha of Lot to his children. But it does not necessarily mean that every guy would yarshin. It's very interesting to note. It says, Ki Yerusha le'esav nasati es har seir. In the Haggadah, we say, I don't remember the exact nusach, but we say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Esav as har seir, the Yaakov Ivanav, Yodim Mitzrayim. That is the lesson that we say in the Haggadah. So the Mefarshim Shtarvlechan, Vos Epis, the Torah talks about Yaakov and Esav separating, when the Baal Haggadah talks about Yaakov and Esav separating, it mentions Nasati the Esav as har seir. What is the fact that Esav received har seir have any relevance to splitting Yaakov and Esav up? But the teretz is there's actually a shaila. If someone says I'm making a neder from anyone who's Zer Avram, is Esav considered Zer Avram? So the place can bring down that in order to be Zer Avram, we have to have suffered. The name Zer Avram means that Klal Yisrael suffered before we have our Geula. And the fact that Esav got har seir is the fact that he's not part of Zer Avram. Because while we were suffering, while we're suffering, he's living life in har seir. So the expression of Nasati is har seir is actually an expression of saying that he's not Zer Avram anymore. So that is the significance of the Nasati of har seir. It's the contrasting that with us who went to Mitzrayim, who suffered, and we're the ones who are Klal Yisrael. We're considered Zer Avram today. Tanu Rabbanan. Yesh be'ivri she'ein be'ivriya. There are ways where an ivri will go out, will have yitziyos that an ivriya does not have. And yesh be'ivriya she'ein be'ivri. Now the brisa that we're about to learn will make zero sense, and every line the Gemara is going to have to explain. The yesh be'ivriya she'ein be'ivri. And the ivriya has certain yitziyos that an ivri doesn't have. Yesh be'ivri. What yitziyos are there by an ivri? To write to b'shanim, which right away is a problem because we know that an Amavriya also goes out after 6 years. Uviyavel, again, we know that an Amavriya goes out with Yavel as well. Mrs. Adon, we know that an Amavriya goes out with Mrs. Adon. Mashiach can be Ivriya. So this needs a lot of explanation because each one of these items that we listed seem to work equally by an Amavriya. The Yesh B'Ivriya, now we have Yitzias by an Amavriya which do not apply to an Eved Ivri. So that makes sense because, of course, an Eved Ivri is not yet to Simonim. The Eminum cares for Nishness. The Amavriya cannot be sold twice. We're going to see what that means as well. Umat noise about Karchoy. You could be a woman, Baal Karchoy, against the will of somebody. I'm not sure yet who that somebody is. The Gemara is going to dive into it. But for Pashat Pshat, we'll say Baal Karchoy, or actually the Kamei Mefarish Lei, but for Pashat, let's say Baal Karchoy of the Adai, the Gemara is going to come to a different conclusion. Mashaykin be'ivri. So Amar, we can't even touch this brisa. We need the Gemara to start dissecting. Amar, yesh be'ivri she'ein be'ivri. Or mini. Yisera olav Amma Ivriya Shekona Atzma B'Simonim. This seems to say, our Mishnah seems to say that there are extra yitzios that an Amma has that an Eved Ivri doesn't, but whatever an Eved Ivri has, an Amma has. Yet the brisa we just learned seems to indicate otherwise. Amar Sheshes, our brisa is speaking not a regular Amar Via, it's an Amar Via going Shiyada. He married her. Yiyud is the act of saying the money that was given to you when you were purchased, or to your father when you were purchased, that should be your kes of Kiddushin, and that she becomes married either to the other or to the other son. So once there's Yiyud, the Amar Via doesn't go free with Shaman. She doesn't go free with Yovel. She's married to him, so she's his wife forever. The only way for a woman that's married to go free is through a get. Just because she became miyuedes. Maybe she should still have all the other yitziyos, and unlike a regular Isha, she should only go free with a get. She should go free with all the other ways that an Abba goes free with. Kamash law that she's a regular married woman, and therefore she only goes free with a get. This same woman that you're talking about has none of the yitziyos of an Ivri. So why is that she goes free with Simonim? Are you telling me her marriage dissolves as soon as she becomes a Naya? No, but the brisa means to say Hachik Amar. Then she go with Simonim. So what was a simple little brisa now reads in a very funny way. Let's go back to the brisa. The Ivri has Yitziyash to end the Ivriya that an Amavriya who's Miyu'edes wouldn't have. The Yesh B'Ivriya to end the Ivri. And an Amar who's not Miyu'edes has ways to be released that an Ivri doesn't have. Yesh B'Ivri, if she had yield. If she didn't have yield, Yesh B'Ivriya, so Ivriya wrote to someone. So at this point, this is how the Gemara is learning the Brisa. I believe this is the Maskon.
Yosy, your voice is not coming through properly. It sounds garbled.
Let me check my microphone. I might not be using the right microphone. But let's have a look. Select the microphone. Is it better now?
Yeah, it sounds a little better.
So I just switched from the microphone in my computer to the microphone on my neck.
Okay, that's better.
Okay, good. Thank you. I don't want you to think that had it come through clearly, it would have made any more sense. Because everyone here in the room is also looking at me like I'm crazy. So it's okay. Okay, so the Gemara weiter. The Einanim cares for nishnus. A woman cannot be sold twice. Michlal, it's saying that this is unique to an Amma Ivriya that she cannot be sold twice. Michlal David Ivri, Nimkar v'nishn. And David Ivri could sell himself, and then he could sell himself again. I think that's not such a kasha, right? We really had earlier, we had a svara. Why is it that if relatives redeem an Eved, why do we say he has to work for them and he doesn't go free? Then he'll do it over and over again. So it seems like an Eved can be sold over and over again. For Tanya, we learned, we learned that the halacha is a Jew can be sold as an Eved by Bezdin. If he steals money and he doesn't have with which to pay back, they'll sell him. So what if he stole $500 and he's liable to pay $500? But we know a Ganav is Mukhir to pay Kefo. So he stole 500 and now he's liable to pay 1,000. But he only has 500 available. The halacha is they will not sell him. If he has enough money to pay back the Karen, even though he cannot pay the kefil, we won't sell him for that. Or if he stole 500, we'll sell him to pay back the 500. But let's say he came to false edus about somebody else that stole, and then they were mazim him. So because he said false edus, there was a chiyuv placed upon him by the Torah And that's why he has to pay 500. So if the money, the chiyuv for him to pay money was triggered not from stealing, but from saying false edus, again, you don't sell him for that. And the part that's relevant to us is b'gneva soy singular, kivin shenimker pa'amachas, once he was sold for this one gneva, shuv iyatarashoy l'moichri. You could never sell him again, which means the first time he does this avera, that's where he'll get sold. As Rashi says, you could not sell him more than once if he stole. So the kasha is, our Brisa seems to indicate that a never is nimkar v'nishnas. Zog to Gemara amarava like kasha. It's not a kasha. Kan b'gneva achas, kan b'shtei gnevos. As you can see from the big Tosfos, he's going to disagree with Rashi, but we will stick with Rashi's pshat. Rashi says the definition of gneva achas means pa'amachas, which means once per gneva. Let's say he stole $10,000, but if they sold him, he would only be worth on the market $5,000. The halach is einay nimkar b'shvil chetzia, nimkar mishum chetzia. You don't say that you sell him to get the 5,000, and then after those 6 years, you sell him again to retrieve the other 5,000. That's what it means. You don't sell him twice. That means if he stole from two separate people. So for one geneva, he's only sold once. But for two genevas, he can be sold once per geneva. Even though the chiyuv for him to pay was not sealed until he did both genevas, he only was schlepped to Bezdin after he already committed both crimes. And his value is only enough to pay for one of his genevas. There we will sell him twice. Nimkar v'choyzer v'nimkar, the kolchada v'chada krina bay v'nimkar b'gnevas. So Rashi learns. So when the Brisa says he could be sold again and again, that's once per geneva. But the Brisa that says he's not sold twice, that means if the value of his work is not even enough to cover one geneva that he made. Correct the Gemara, that makes no sense. Abaye is not like Rabba's shot, that b'gneva soy means once per geneva. Because b'gneva soy tuva mashma. The word b'gneva soy does not mean for his one geneva. It could even be referring to multiple genevas. And Rashi shows us examples of where a word that seems to be singular tense, in fact, means multiple times. Now let's see Rashi inside. Tuva mashma im omer al shteim bedin echad kulon karina be b'gneva soy. Even if he stole multiple times from different people, that is still referred to with the word b'gnevasai. So the pasuk should be telling you that you're only sold once, even for multiple gnevas. Unlike you, Rava, who wanted to say, well, you could be sold once per gneva. That's not what the pasuk seems to say. The pasuk seems to say that you're sold once, even for multiple gnevas. Where do you see that something in singular tense could mean plural? By Ninveh. It was Behema Rabbah, many behemoths in the city of Ninveh, but they refer to not as Behemois rabbis, but as Behemah Rabbah. So you see, even the singular could mean multiple, and Daga Asher B'Yar, which was by the Makas Dam. Daga singular tense, but it can be used for multiple fish. So Abai's kash is, don't say V'nimkar b'gneva so you're sold for one gneva, as you want to say, Rav. The nimkar b'gneva so means you're sold once, even for multiple gnevas. El Amar Abaye, I'm going to have to offer a different teretz. We have one brayso that says someone is sold twice, and we have another brayso that says a person is only sold once. Leikasha kan ba'adam echad kan b'shnei pnei adam. What does this mean, Zakrach? Kan ba'adam echad she'omad b'din b'vasachas. If he stole from multiple people, but they were all judged in one session, there einoi nimkar v'nishne afilu b'gneva isharve. They have a dumya da'achas. Even though there's multiple gnevas, we call that b'gneva as Abai just said. So when are there multiple sales? Meaning, he stole from Reuven. Reuven took him to the entire, and they had to sell him because of it. He gets out of jail, he gets out of his avdos, and then he sells again. He steals again. And then again, they take him to Beis Din. That's where you could sell him multiple times. So, Abu B'Shnei B'nei Adam, Shamamidim Aisha, Shtei Pam B'Din, they're Nimkar B'Shvil Kol Achas V'Achas. V'hu Adin, Im Ganav V'Yamud B'Din, V'Nimkar, V'Chazav V'Ganav, V'Shiyetzei Chavshi, Chazav V'Nimkar. So as long as there's two separate Amadas B'Din, whether he stole the second time, right after the first time, but they were judged in separate cases, or whether he stole after he was released and he did the whole thing all over again, either way, he will be able to be sold twice. It's the same thing. It was after the original Hamad B'Din, as long as it was a separate sitting in court. So Zok Tanu Rabbanan. I thought you would do it. If he stole and he made a lot of money, who gets to keep it? Him or does his other keep it? Tanu Rabbanan. Gnevoi Elef. What if he stole $1,000? And that's what he's liable to pay. But Vishama Chamesh Me'os. He himself, if they sell him, they'll only get 500. The halach is Nimkar V'choizer V'Nimkar. They'll sell him twice because they need to retrieve 1,000 out of him. Of course, this doesn't stem with what we just learned. Gnevoi Chamesh Me'os. What if he's worth what if what he stole was only worth 500? Vishava Elef, and he's worth 1,000. Again, Eini Nimkar Klal, Eini Nimkar Kama. He's not sold. Why is he not sold? Because he's worth more than what the Gneva is. Klal, Eini Nimkar Klal. I'm sorry, Eini Nimkar won't be sold at all. Rabbi Eliezer Aimer, my Gneva Keneged Memkarai Nimkar. The only time he is sold is only if his value is precisely the same amount of the Gneva that he owes. Not such a likely case. Vimlav Eini Nimkar at all. So Dr. Rava Bahaz Chanu Rabbi Lozer LeRabban. In this way, we have to give in to Rabbi Lozer, because we also said that if he's worth more, you don't sell him. But we disagree, and we say that if he's worth less, you do sell him. But Rabbi Lozer is a good taina, because why is it that if he's not worth the same amount as a Geneva, why don't you sell him? The Ma'ishna Geneva Chamesh Me'os V'Shava Elef They Nibka. There we agree he's not sold. Why not? The Nimkar Kuloi Amrachman of Leichetcha. Because all of him has to be sold, not half of him. And here, you're only going to be able to sell half of him, because that's all that he's liable to pay. Hachanami, so too, Nimkar B'Gneva Soy Amrachmana, V'Le Nimkar B'Chatzik Gneva Soy. If he's worth less than the amount owing, then you have a deed for the person with Nimkar B'Gneva Soy, V'Le B'Chatzik Gneva Soy. So therefore, Rabbi Eliezer is a good taina. Since we agree with him halfway, we should surely agree with him both ways. Now, this is the reason why Tosfos doesn't like Rashi's pshat, because Abaye's pshat at the end was that he's not nimkar. He's not nimkar if it was two dinim. In other words, if there was one Hamad B'Din, he's only sold once, but for multiple Hamad B'Dins, he could be sold multiple times. So what's really going to come out is, if he's going to be sold once if he's going to be sold once with multiple, and there's multiple Genevas involved, well, then it might not cover. It won't be covering properly. So that was part of why Tosfos didn't like Rashi's pshat. I won't get into it because we have a daf to finish. Zok the more weiter. Umaftin oisa bal karchay. A Amar Vriya is redeemed against the will of him. Who is the him? Sava Rabba Lamemar bal karchay da adon. Even if the adon doesn't want to free his Amma, if they come up with the pidyon, he has to let her go free. Amar le'abayi, mind you, why wouldn't he want if he was given cash? It must be the kasavna leishtara adame. And why wouldn't he want to free her? Because she didn't come up with the cash. What she did is she gave him an IOU note. The value of my work that I haven't yet put in is worth $1,000. Let me give you an IOU note for $1,000. So to Braita, you could force the Adon to accept such a pidyon. Correct, Gemara. Am I? Why in the world would you force the Adon to accept such a pidyon? Nagat Marganisa biyadeh. He has a phenomenal employee. He's very happy with her. Yeah, Hivna lechasba. You're going to force him to accept a dirty shard, a useless piece of paper, an IOU note. Why would you force him to accept that? It cannot mean that would be acceptable. Al Amar Abaye, al korche bal korche ta'av. You could be paid to her from the other, even if the father would not have wanted. So Rashi, if you know that the father can afford to buy his daughter back, you force the father to redeem her. So a man sells his daughter, and then he comes into some money. We force the father to buy his daughter back. Why? Because it's not such an honorable thing for a family that one of theirs is sold as an eved. So therefore, we want this cleaned up as fast as possible. If it's all about pegam mishpacha, yachi eved every nami nichvenu levnei mishpacha mishum pegam mishpacha. Why wouldn't you always force? Because the same pegam mishpacha that exists when an amma ivriya is sold would exist if an eved ivri is sold. The reason why we don't allow an eved ivri, we don't force anyone to redeem an eved ivri, is because hadar azil umaz bin avshay, because he'll take advantage of the situation. If he knows his bnei mishpacha is forced to redeem him, he's going to sell himself again and again and take advantage. Hachanami, so too, hadar azbin umaz bin la. Well, why don't you have the same problem with an amma ivriya? If you force the father to redeem her, he will then sell her again. Zok to Gemara, no, that doesn't work. Hakatani einan imkeres finishnes. We already said that once she's sold once as an amma, she can no longer be sold again. Mashek and Eved Ivri can continue to sell himself. Therefore, we cannot force his family to redeem him. Umani Reb Shimoni. This that you cannot sell an amma twice in a row is not accepted by everybody. It's Reb Shimon Shita. The Tanya we learned. Moicher Adam esbitay leishus v'shoina. A man could marry his daughter off, and he could marry her off again, which Rashi explains. Kibul ba Kiddushin v'nis armano in the sky shomina erisin chayzer umakacha la'acher because of Kiddushin shaloy brogra. A father marries his daughter off. If she becomes an almana or a grusha, he could marry her off again as long as she's still below the age of bagrus. That telach of ishus acher ishus l'shivchus v'shoina as well. In other words, if he sold her as a shivcha, and then she came back by Yovel, or after 6 years, and she's still a ktana, the father could sell her again. That's how this shita learns. And leishus acher shivchas. If she became a shivcha, an amma ivriya, and then she returned to him before she became an adult, the father can still marry her off. Once he married her off, he would no longer be able to sell her as a shivcha. So Rashi says, Kibul Kiddushin, the Chazra Elav, he was Makabal Kiddushin for her, and she returned home, either Shanish Armala, for instance, she became an Almana, then Ein Chayzer Umaycher L'Shivchas, then he cannot sell her anymore, and this will all be derived from Psukim. So Shivchas Achaishis is the only exception. That's the Tanakana. Reb Shimon Omer, who we're looking for, who holds that you cannot sell her twice, Kishem Sheinada Moichers Bita L'Shivchas Achaishis, Kach Ein Oda Moichers Bita L'Shivchas Achashivchas. Can't sell her twice, and that's why we could force a father to redeem his daughter, because he won't be able to sell her again. What is the machloikis that determines whether or not he can marry her off twice or sell her as a shivcha twice? It's all totally in how you read a pasuk. Now we know there's kri and there's ksiv. The Gemara refers to kri is yesh aim lemikra. Do you follow what the pasuk itself says, which is the ksiv? And then there's the yesh aim lemasiris. Rather, do you follow what the pronunciation of the word is that we have in Messiah? So it says in the pasuk, "La'am nachri." I don't have a new Gemara here, so I actually have to look up the pasuk in Parshas Mishpatim, where it talks about Yiyud. So it says, "Imra be'inei Adonai asher lo ya'ada v'hefta la'am nachri lo yimshar l'machra bevigdei ba." Bevigdei ba is spelled Beis Gimel Daled Vav. So it's Bevigdei Va. What does Bevigdei Va mean? What is the type of Bevigdei Va? That's what we're going to be focusing on. So Zok to Gemara, the Tanya we learned Bevigdei Ba. What does it mean? Bevigdei Ba. Turning on to Yudches Samach Beis, Kivon Shepirish Talisa Alha. Once she became married, Pirish Talisa means someone married her. Kivon Shepirish Talisa Alha, Shuv Ein Rishai Lamachra, he can no longer sell her divrei Rebbe Kiva. So Rebbe Kiva learns once she becomes Mikudeshes, he cannot sell her again. Rabbi Lazar Aimer, Bevogdoiba. There's no yud there, so we pronounce it Bevogdoi, meaning what's the word for it? He betrayed her. That's right. He betrayed her by selling her. When you sell someone, you betray her. Bevogdeba. Kivin shabogadba. Since he betrayed her, shuv ein rashai lamoicha. He's no longer allowed to sell her. So basically, there's a machlokes here. If he married her off once, is he not allowed to sell her? Like Rebbe Kiva, which is totally in yesh aim lemesiris, or is it yesh aim lemikra according to Rebbe Lazar? So let's think about this. I might have said this fakir. Bebig doiba means beged. Bebig doiba, he married her off. In other words, someone spread his talus over her. That would normally be written with a yud between the base and the gimel. Bebig doiba, his beged is on her. If you hold yesh aim lemesiris, that's how it would read. I hope I'm getting this right. If without the yud, it would be read bebog doiba. So let's have a look over here. Zok to Gemara. B'may pligi, Rabbi Lazar savar yesh aim lemesiris. So it's exactly the opposite. Rabbi Lazar says you focus on the Messiah, which is how it's written, which is bebog doiba. Therefore, once he sells her, he may not sell her again. Rabbi Kiva savar yesh aim lemikra, which is the way it's pronounced, which is bevig doiba, and that means once he marries her off, he cannot sell her anymore. Rab Shimon, Arab Shimon says, yesh aim lemikra ula mesiris. You follow both versions, and therefore, whether he had married her off or whether he had once sold her, he could no longer sell her again. And that's Arab Shimon, and therefore Rab Shimon holds that the reason why you could force a father to redeem his daughter is because he cannot sell her again. Let's see Rashi. Kivin Japir Shalisa Alel, the Al-Korchach Miboide Leukmi, Yeshem Lemikra Rabbi Kiva. We're forced to say that according to Rabbi Kiva, it's Yeshem Lemikra, meaning Bevigdoi, the way it's read. Kidamin B'Sanhedrin Peperkama, Yeshem Lemesiris Rabbi Lazar. According to Rabbi Lazar, you read it the way our Messiah tells us it's printed in the Torah. Kididakinam B'Bchayris. Okay, so I don't want to get into all the details, so let's go back. Let's go to the next pasuk. La'am Nachri, the Hainu L'Shivchas, L'Yimshul La'av, the father should not have the koyach to sell her. Me'acher Shepirish Talisai Adain Aleh L'Shemiyud. Once the Adain married this woman, and the figurative way we describe it is he spread his palace over her to marry her L'Shemiyud. So at that point, Im Girsha Beged, if the Adain divorced this Amma, V'chazra Eitz Alaviyah, and now she returned to her father, he could no longer sell her. The Vigdei Ba, because Kiddushin was made. Avalo Yada, what if the Adain did not make Yud? V'chazra Eitz Alav, and she returned to her father because her 6 years have expired. Chayzer Meichra, he would be allowed to sell her again. Ki Rabbanan da Amr Il, like the Rabbanan who we quoted earlier in the Brisa, in the Machlokes with Shimon, l'shivchis acher ishus hu deloy. He cannot sell her for a shivcha after she was married. Kihachi, just like what we're saying over here in Rabbi Kiva, the mechiyada havel ishus. Once there's yield, which we consider to be ishus, there he cannot sell her again. Aval shivchis acher shivchis motzi masbet. But if the other never married her, and she came back from her shivchus, the father can sell her again. That's the shita of Rabbi Kiva. Since he betrayed her, meaning he really sold her the shivchus, even if she didn't get married, but if someone was Makadisher and the marriage broke up, of course he would be able to sell it. Rab Shimon Dorish Laha, he dashes it both ways. Rabbi Lazar of Kivin Shabagadba Shuvla Yivkarena. Therefore, once he sells her, he cannot sell her again. But Vidarish Linami Kerbakiva, the Kivin Shapirish Chalisila, also Layim Karen. So he learns both Aim and Messiahs. Lachik Amar Loy Leshivkas Acher Ishus, Loy Leshivkas Acher Shivkas, because he dashes both ways. Messiahs is Bebugdoi Ksiv, without the Yud. Veloy Bebigdoi, which would be pronounced if there was a Yud there. Ein Havaris Chirik below Yud. Whenever you have a Chirik, as the Chirik under the base of Big Doi, there would have to be a Yud after the base. Unakuda Shetachas Habayis, B'mokam Yud Mishtameshes. The Chirik under the base, even though we pronounce it Big Doi without the Yud, it's because we look at it as if there was a Yud there. But the way it was actually written without the Yud, which would be the Bogdoi, Loshan Begida, Loshan of betrayal, okay? Yeshem Mikra, and therefore it's Bebogdoi, I'm sorry, Bebigdoi, Karina and Kamay to Spaseo Bebigdoi. There also it means beged and not betrayal. Or Yeshem Mikra Ulam Osiris. So Yeshem Osiris would be Bogdoi. Yeshem Mikra would be Bigdoi. Shimon holds you dash in both ways. Frekt Rashi, you can't do both. The Gemara brings Rashi brings right from Sukkah, you can't do both. So Rashi, no, you can't do both if the Mikra and Messiahs contradict each other. Like how many walls you need to have in a Sukkah. You can't, it cannot be the requirement, it cannot be 2 walls and 3 walls. It's either one or the other. But here where you can actually say both are relevant, if both are relevant, it'll also work. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. So that's how Reb Shimon knows that you never can sell after marriage or after a.
In the art scroll, it's translated as a betray. I think
Rashi is a betrayal.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, Rashi follows that. I think the art scroll follows the Rashi and translates it as betrayal. So he only brings down one sheet. I don't know if it's even possible to translate it 2 ways. And
well, the big day could be a beged.
Yeah, but it doesn't they didn't translate it that way.
Okay, so let's see the Gemara back there. Boy Rabba Baravu. Rabba Bavu had a shayla. Yiyud nisu noisa or eris noisa. When an Adon does Yiyud, does that make a Nisuin, or does it only make an Erisin and he still has to do a Nisuin later? Nafkamina, what is the difference? Liyarsha v'litamila ulahafanidir. If an Adon does Yiyud, but he had not yet done Nisuin, and then she dies. It could be any time after he buys this woman. So she could work for him for 2 years, and then he decides that he likes her, and then he could marry her. My what's Allah? Tashma. Let's see if you can bring a raya. Bevig deba, kivan shapirish talise alea, shuv ein rishay lemoichra. So let's make a deal. Zevuni hu delay mizvinla. He can no longer sell her once it was pirish talise alea. Hayu uday mi'aidla. Mashma that he could do yiyud, meaning that if he only had Kedushin, if his daughter, if he was Mekadesh's daughter to somebody, and then that marriage broke up, he would be able to do Yud. The Amrit Nisun Oisa, if you hold that Yud automatically does Nisun, even the Nisis, Shuv Ein, Lovi, Rishuspa. Once you already had Yud, it wouldn't be able to happen again. So let's see Rashi. Yud, Amar La Mosaya Ivriya, Harayat Yudali Bekesef Meknesaya. The Gemara wants to know, does that have a status of Kiddushin or of Nisuin? In fact, the Gemara, it says that we learn, the Brisa told us, Bevigdei ba, Kivin Shapirish Talisi Alea, once he does Yud, Shuv Ein Rishai L'Moichra, he can't sell it. So the Gemara Shavdak, he can't sell her, but he could do Yud. What does this mean? Hayud Mi'ayid Kloimar L'Kiddushin Shaloi L'Shem Shivchus Moichra, which tells us that once Yid was done, he can no longer sell her. But you know what he can do? He can still marry his daughter off. So that was the deal that the Gemara wants to make. Once the Adon made Yid, the father can only not sell her if he gets her back. But it's mashma that he could marry her off and make Kiddushin. But the Amrit Nesuna, so if you say that once the Adon does Yud, it was automatically in the Nesuin, the halacha is, even in this is Shuv Ein Lavi Rishus Ba. There's an overarching rule that when someone marries off his daughter and Nesuin occurs, once Nesuin occurs, it severs any control that the father has on this girl. Elalav Shmamino, it must be, since we're able to be medayik from the Brisa, that even after Yud, the father can still marry his daughter off. It's proof positive that Eris and Oisa, the Yid only did Erisin. Because if the Yid did Nesuin, then the father would completely lose his grasp over his daughter. Amar Nachbar Yitzchak, no. Hacha b'Kiddushin de Almakai. It doesn't really mean Yid Mamish. It doesn't mean Kivin Shapir Shalisei Allah is referring to a case of Yid. No. It's referring to a standard case of Kiddushin. V'achi kamar, Kivin Shemasra Aviyah, Lemishin Ischayev, B'Sheira, Ksusa Vaynasa, Shuv Ein Yochel Moicha. So I apologize. What it means is once he sells her, I'm sorry, he's not selling her. It's referring to a standard Kiddushin. Once he gives her over to a man in Kiddushin, who although he's not Chayiv yet, but he will become Lemishin Ischayev, B'Sheira, Ksusa Vaynasa, by someone who will be Mechuyev eventually to support her fully. Therefore, Shuv Ein Yochel Moicha, he cannot sell her anymore. Which means their taka means Nesuin. So what we're teaching it is not as Yud, but as an actual Nesuin. So when the Brisa says once again, Kivin Shapir Talisela, it means he gave her up to Nesuin. Once he gave over to Nesuin, then it's severed. So that's how the Gemara is learning this Brisa. So it says of a Kivin Shemasra, Lemishin Eschaiba, Loimer Shekitcha Leishos, he wants to take her forever, then he could no longer sell her. Gevalti. Tashma. Ein Moicha, so we still have the Shaila. Does Yid make Kiddushin in Nesuin? So it says, Ein Moicha L'Kroivim. A person is never allowed to sell and as his daughter is an Amariya to Kroivim. Why? Because as we learned a couple of days ago, it has to be possible to do Yid. And if he sells it to a Karev where there'll be an Isser, Chayvik Krisos, for him to marry her, that means he's purchasing an Amma that could never come to yield, therefore you cannot sell her. But Mishum Eliezer Amru, Moichor LeKroivim. You are allowed to sell it to Kroivim. So Rabbi Eliezer holds that yield is optional, and you're allowed to buy an Amma even if yield is not possible. But for Shavin, everybody agrees, Shemoichor Almana LeKoin Gadol, Gerusha v'Chalutza LeKoin Het. Everybody agrees that if there's not an Isser Karish, it's just an Isser Lav, you're allowed to sell your daughter as an Amma, even though yield would be prohibited because of a Lav, either because she's an Almana and the other is a Kohen Gadol, or she's a Grusha, or she's a Grusha, and the other is a Kohen Het. So let's analyze this. Hi Almana Hechidam. What exactly is this Almana where Vishavin Shemoicha Almana? How did she get married in the first place that she became an Almana? Ilema the Kaddish Navsha, if this little Kitana accepted Kiddushin for herself, it's not valid at all. Almana Karila. Not an Almana, they played house, but she was never married. Ve'ela the Kitshavia, it must be that the father accepted Kiddushin for her. Frakti Gemara, based on what you said earlier, that a father who accepts Kiddushin for his daughter, Mi Matzi Mazmana, would he be able to now sell her again after he has already married her off? We just said that once he already married her off, l'shem ishus, he could no longer sell her again. So what is the case that the Mishnah is saying that everybody agrees that he would be able to sell his daughter, who's an almana, to a kohen gadol? Well, how did she become an almana? She became an almana through yiyud. Ba'aliba to Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda, and it would be following the sheet of Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda, the Amar Mois Harishonos Lav LeKiddushin. It would be going according to Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda, where you require a new set of Mois. So let's see Rashi. Zok Rashi, Meicher LeKroivim V'loy Ba'in Yiyud. Rabbi Eliezer holds that you don't have to. You can even buy an amma who it's not royal to marry. If you could marry her, Amar Kradatov Yud works. The Shavin Shemecha, everybody agrees that the Shavin Shemecha Kishi Almana, the Kohen Gadol, if he had a daughter who was an Almana, a daughter Aktana who was an Almana, but he sold her as a Shifcha to Kohen Gadol, the Kiddushin Toifsin Loiba, Kiddushin will be Toifis. The Kiddushin Toifsin Mechavi Lavan. Kiddushin is Toifis Mechavi Lavan, so it will work. We're not recommending that it's done because it's allowed, but she could be sold as an Alma at least. So, for example, the Kaddish Nafsha, how did she become an Almana? If she was Mekadosh herself, Shaloi Al Diavia, Vince Almana, Karila Bitmia, the Chiesh B'maisa Ketana Klum. Of course, her own marriage is nothing. The Amar of Amram, so what was the case that the father is selling his Almana? He had first sold her as a Shifcha, and she became Miyu Edes. So how could he sell her again? How is it that he could sell her again? He's already given her over for Yud, meaning he already gave her over for a marriage. And once you give her over for a marriage, you cannot sell her again. It's Halibud Rabbi Yosy ben Yehuda, Damar Lakamon, Mois Harishonos Shel Meknasa Lav LeKedushin. The original money that someone pays for his Amma cannot be used for the Kiddushin. So when he's being miyayed her, what is he being miyayed her with? What a value? What a value is he giving her? What is he giving her? He's giving her the value that he has, that she needs to work for him still. That's what he's giving her. That's going to be considered the Kesef Kiddushin. The Ein Kiddushin Elu Al Yidei Av. That didn't come from the father. If it's the original money that the father receives from the purchaser, there you could say the father married her off. But if the father merely sold her as an Eved, and now he makes her own independent Kiddushin with her that the father's not involved with, that wouldn't be considered Kiddushin Al Yidei Av. Ugzeres HaKosafi to you Kiddushin. There's Ugzeres HaKosafi that this Kiddushin works on Aktana. This is an anomaly. It's Kiddushin of Aktana, and it works because that's the phenomena of Yud. Since the father never married off this girl, because Yud, we don't consider, according to Rabbi Yosy ben Yehuda, Yud is not considered a marriage that the father married her off. Therefore, it's as if she married herself off. She's not an almana, but nevertheless, when she becomes an almana and goes back to her father's household, he could now sell her again. Now that we finally got down pat what the Bryce is talking about, it's talking about Yud, but if Yud makes Nisuin, so then Viter, the father, shouldn't be able to sell her again. Because Kivin Shenisis, Shuv Ein, Lavir Shuspa. Once she became as a Nesua to this Adon, and she becomes an Almana after that, the father should not be able to sell her again. Frankly, more of Elamai Erisin, so what are you going to argue? That Yud only makes Erisin? And that explains why the father's allowed to sell her after she loses her husband? Well, then we have another problem. Because let's look at the second half of the Brisa. The Shavin Shemaycher, everybody agrees that she can be sold. How could that be? The fact of the matter is he can't sell her for shivchis after ishus. And even if it's only Erison, there's still ishus there, and he shouldn't be able to sell her again. What are you going to have to argue? Shiny Erison Dida, Erison Davia. The Erison of Yud, according to the way we're learning, according to Rabbi Yosy ben Yehuda, is not an Erison that the father gave her over to Erison. It was done independently because it's between the Adon and this Amma, and the father wasn't involved. So if you want to say that shiny Erison Dam Erison Davia, and since this case of Yud was her own Erison, therefore it doesn't stop her father from selling her again, well then afilu teimin nisuin. So then I could even argue that Yud makes nisuin, but shiny nisuin dida min nisuin davia. But there's a difference between if her father gave her over to nisuin, that would disqualify him from selling her again, versus if she gave herself over to nisuin, which would not disqualify her. That's we should have ran out of time. We'll have to redo this anyway tomorrow. We might as well finish the line. Hi, my Bishlama Erison, Ma'erison, shiny. I understand there's a very big difference between an erison that he gives her over versus an erison that she gives herself over. As Rashi says, the Hakpad is on the father, don't sell her twice. The Loila Zavna busted the kitchen. After you already gave her over in Kiddushin, don't sell her again. The Chivin down the Kiddushin, lav you of it, need to know Rishish L'moicha. But Nisuin, there's no argument to make a distinction between his Nisuin and her Nisuin. El Nisuin, Nisuin. A Nisuin which was done through him or through her, me shiny, why should it make a difference? As Rashi says, even the Nisuin they rise in the new, Nafka Lagamri Mishuse. The halacha is that once a woman's in the Suah, her father loses any control over her. It's not about if he sold her, if she sold her, it's not relevant. On the Suah, the father completely loses control over his daughter. Kiddushin, it's only because the Torah said once he married her off, he shouldn't marry her off again. So there you'll make a distinction between did he marry her off or did the Kiddushin come on her own? Nisuin, it doesn't matter how the Nisuin came. Once there's a Nisuin, she's completely out of the control of her father. Okay, we'll stop here and we'll review that tomorrow. Thank you. So I met your niece